Leading up to this show, I made sure to maintain my expectations. I had my complaints already, such as like the art style, but I blamed the Netflix higher-ups for that one. But considering we didn't know anything about the plot, I made sure to remain neutral. Just to get it out of the game, my rating of the show is 4 out of 10. Realistically, I'd say it's a 6, but I've got my reasons. I enjoyed the first 5 episodes, but the remaining 3 just kind of dropped the ball for me. Anyway, starting off Dante's character. I don't dislike him in this show, but I don't particularly like him either. He feels like a blend of Nero and Dante, not just because Johnny voices him. Will say it doesn't exactly help, but I'd say it probably comes from how I guess outwardly emotional he is, if that makes sense. Not to say that Dante is not an emotional character, because he absolutely is, don't get me wrong. That is a fact. But he's always been one to kind of keep his emotions sort of hidden. It's hard to tell what's going on in his mind, but we get clues as to what he's thinking, you know. The dark shadow over him as Credo dies in his arms, Lady noticing his tears after his battle with Virgil, and his refusal to let Nero take part in the fight against Urizen and Virgil in DMC5. Speaking of Nero, I think he is the opposite of Dante in this way. He speaks his mind a lot. We know what's going on in his mind. Think about the scene where Kyrie gets captured in Devil May Cry 4. You know, if that was Dante and say Lady was captured, he would not be nearly as outbursting that much. Dante in the show just doesn't have enough of that, for lack of a better term, hiding emotion aspect. Even to the point where emotion is what activates his devil trigger, like he's a Super Saiyan. You know, the rebellion doesn't serve its original purpose. He just kind of has it. You know, it's not even explained where it comes from. It doesn't stab him, and that's not, you know, that's how he gets his devil trigger like a Devil May Cry 3. No, he just kind of does it. One example for how I can, you know, explain what I mean about Dante not being outwardly emotional is his thoughts towards his demon half, how they do it in the show. In Devil May Cry 3, Dante's refusal to accept his demon half and Sparda as his father is with him how he shrugs off Virgil's words when Virgil tells him, why do you refuse to seek power, the power of our father Sparda? And he just says, I don't have a father. You know, whereas in the show, he's almost trying to deny it, like really like no, he's not my dad, I'm not part of it, I don't know what you're talking about. Which I guess it is the same, really, but it's just not. I don't know. It's very like in denial in a really like he's not convinced it of himself kind of thing. You know, he's less confident in that belief. But again, I do not dislike Dante in the show. I'm just kind of yeah, whatever about him. For Lady though, I barely even know what to say. I'm not a massive Lady fan, so I can't outright say she's been mischaracterized. Many of my friends say she is, but I don't know her character well enough, honestly. But I can definitely say her excessive swearing was ungodly unnecessary. Makes me roll my eyes. But one thing I definitely say about her character, her betrayal with Dante is just wrong. I was ready for her to defect from Darkcom and side with Dante. We saw how she was becoming less hostile towards him, but in the end she betrayed him because Joe Biden Batman told her to. Unrelated, but Kevin Conroy's performance was amazing. You know, rest in peace to the man. I'm not a fan of the Vice President character, but his voice was great. As for Arkham and the Rabbit, right out of the gate I was expecting these two to be the same character, partly because of how they originally were with the Devil May Cry 3 manga. But instead, no, Arkham presumably, so maybe he's not dead, presumably dies in Lady's childhood in the fire. And the rabbit is just kind of some guy who walked into the underworld one day and became friends with some demons, and he's not even a demon. My complaints about the rabbit really are tied to how the underworld is represented in the show, which is really pissed me off. Like, pissed me off beyond measure. The underworld is my favourite part of Devil May Cry. Devil May Cry 3 made me fall in love with the underworld, how it's portrayed as this freaky maze dimension. It's unsettling, it's creepy. I remember playing DMC3 for the first time and genuinely being kind of scared. But the underworld in this show could not be further from that. Even a generic fire world would have been better. You know how hell is, you know, the place where sinners go to burn for eternity. But instead we got, it's more like a generic alien planet, and if it helps, my interpretation of the underworld is that it's more like a rainforest. You got the bottom levels where all the bug and animal-like demons are. The higher up you go, the more sort of civilized it gets. You know, right at the bottom, that's where your Impusa are. The Furies from Devil May Cry 5. You know, the reptiles, the bugs. And then, you know, right at the top, that's where Sparta was. That's where Mundus, Argosax. That's where the big players are. But moving on, I want to talk about the visuals of the show, like the designs and all of that. Because the art style, again, like I said, I don't like, but I blame the Netflix higher-ups. There's rumours that they're to blame and the show was going to have a more stylized look, but anyway, I really like the designs of the weapons. Dante's design is naff, but his Devil Trigger is beautiful. Probably my second favourite Devil Trigger design in the entire franchise. Sparta himself is also amazing, and on the topic of the weapons, the lack of ebony and ivory is interesting. I don't have an issue with the guns being missing. It's faithful to the lore established in the DMC1 novel. Dante started off with regular guns that he kept breaking, and Nell Goldstein made him ebony and ivory. That is the lore. And I know they're likely going to appear in Season 2, but many of Adi Shankar's tweets leading up to the release and the show's own opening implied Dante was going to get them in this season, so it just kind of feels a bit, you know. Let's talk about Virgil. I'm intrigued. Unsure what the general consensus is, but I'm very, very into the idea of Virgil has grown up in the demon realm. Reminds me of the alternate universe in the Devil May Cry 2 novel, where Dante was captured in his childhood by Mundus and is like a top man for him, like Nello Angelo, but, you know, no need for brainwashing, because Mundus is the one that raised him. I also do like that Nello Angelo is seemingly just Virgil's Devil Trigger. That's kind of like a thing in Devil May Cry 3 with Super Virgil. No, the Sparta corrupted costume Virgil. When you go Devil Trigger, he just turns into Nello Angelo. When I play Devil May Cry 5, I run a mod that replaces his Sin Devil Trigger with Nello Angelo. It's cool. It's cool as fuck in my opinion. Unsure if it'll turn out well, but I think making Virgil a willing soldier of Mundus instead of just brainwashing is interesting and a fitting narrative for an alternate universe show. You know, Dante is a character I want to be faithful, but Virgil is a character that I'm more open to different interpretations, as long as his personality is kept right. Now for the music usage, I'll keep it brief, but I don't think it's the worst thing ever. Devil Trigger is just not it. That's this Nero song. The lyrics are about Nero, and you know, it's pretty clear they picked it because it's called Devil Trigger. They use it in the scene where Dante goes Devil Trigger. You can see exactly why it was picked. But I feel like Subhuman could have worked. Maybe not, because Subhuman could be written, like the lyrics might be about Devil May Cry 5 Dante in particular, so maybe it wouldn't fit. But you know, at least it's a Dante song and not a Nero song, a guy who's not even in the show. But Bury the Light, I like the little leitmotif when the fake Virgil shows up, and they also, people are saying, you know, but it's a song about DMC5 Virgil, which I agree with, but they use the part of the song that references Devil May Cry 3 and not the parts that are about his character in 5. The I Am the Storm That Is Approaching, that is a DMC3 reference to a line that Arkham says. But of course, the final scene, they use the rest of the song to kind of invalidate that. So, you know, they kind of just obviously picked it because it's the Virgil song. Devils Never Cry, absolutely beautiful. I didn't even consider that could have been the credit song. I was expecting like the final emotional battle between Dante and Nello Angelo, that to be Devils Never Cry, but no, it's just a credit song, and you know what, it's beautiful. American Idiot, I love that song, but what the fuck? Like, ironically, it's probably the most tonally accurate, but the reasons for it are not it. My second biggest complaint, aside from the Underworld, is the aggressive, almost forced America bad narrative that they've got going on. Because part of Devil May Cry's appeal for me is the made up locations. Like in GTA, it's not London or New York that Devil May Cry takes place in, it's Redgrave City. Devil May Cry 4 doesn't take place in Italy like Rome or something, it takes place in Fortuna. I'm not against it taking place in New York. I've always pictured Dante as a New Yorker, but the way the show constantly nails it into us that this takes place in America. Lady's working for the American government, she's working for the feds. Darkcom is a company led by the Vice President of the United States who looks like Joe fucking Biden. And we see the American flag everywhere. The rabbit takes a fucking jab at Americans shooting first, our question later, blah blah blah, you get my point. It's awful. I hate America as much as the next Brit. But this show's America bad narrative is so corny and forced. I don't really know how else to put it really. And in a Devil May Cry show, it's not a bad narrative to have. Like I said, I don't like America. I agree with it, trust me. But in Devil May Cry, I don't want to hear about capitalism bad and oppression and reference the 2003 invasion of Iraq because Saddam Hussein got a name drop in episode 1. This is just not the right franchise for this, not in the slightest. And it's made even worse with the ending. This show ends on the Vice President of the United States starting a holy war, sending fighter jets into the underworld, showing how they're specifically targeting innocent demons, all while American fucking idiot blasts in the background. They don't even try to lessen the blow with some kind of fictional nation that's meant to represent the United States. It's just straight up the actual United States of America. There's also the religion stuff. I'm not going to touch on that very much, but it's also incredibly annoying. I don't think they're presenting a religion bad narrative like some people were thinking, but the constant mention of it, of religion, especially by the Vice President character, was just like, come on. Lastly, I want to talk about how the lead up to the show is handled, mainly Adi Shankar's tendency to reveal just unnecessary details. I feel that aside from the plot, a lot of things about this show simply just weren't a mystery because Adi Shankar would not stop revealing things anytime someone tweeted how they wanted this or that, they were angry that this thing was being done that way, etc. Lucia's cameo was not a surprise because he'd already tweeted she was in the show. Virgil being in the show was not a mystery. Devils Never Cry being in the show. Many other songs were, we saw that were revealed because Netflix 2 days before the show's release tweeted out a bunch of the songs for some reason. Even details that pertain to the coming seasons are not the one we just got. You get my point. Aside from the main plot, there was almost no mystery around this show. At the end of the day though, I did genuinely enjoy it. Realistically, I think it's a 5 or a 6 out of 10, maybe a 7 at a push. But the Rabbids character, especially the way the underworld was handled, dropped this down to a 4 out of 10 for me personally.